American workers to have the most modern equipment in the world so that they can compete and be productive, and they can be more productive than Chinese or Indian workers. It's a very deliberate strategy. Now, in that process, we also want to fundamentally change unemployment for a practical reason. If we're going to have the most modern machinery in the world, we have to have the best trained workers in the world. So I would modify unemployment compensation to say if you need it, you can get it, but in order to get it, you have to sign up for a business-based training program so you are learning a new skill during the period where we're giving you money. It is fundamentally wrong to give people 99 weeks of money for doing nothing. Just think about the consequences. In 99 weeks, you can earn an associate degree. I mean, that's how big the difference is. So now we're going to modernize the equipment and we're going to modernize the workforce so we can compete with anybody. I'd also reduce the corporate income tax to 12.5%. That's the Irish level. It will do three things. First, it will liberate $700 billion that is currently tied up overseas because they won't bring it home at a 35% range. So you'd automatically have more money coming home to be reinvested. Second, it lets American companies compete anywhere in the world. At 12.5%, we actually have a lower tax rate than Canada, for example. Third, I tell my liberal friends, it actually means that General Electric would pay taxes. Because when you lower the rate enough, they lay off the tax lawyers and write the check, because it's less expensive to just write the check. We also would abolish the death tax so that no family would ever again be punished for working hard, doing everything right. And you know, when it turned out that Governor Romney paid about 15%, liberals promptly said, oh, he should pay a lot more. Well, I'm a conservative. We have a proposal that you have the option to either keep the current tax code, all the deductions, all the paperwork, or you can choose a one-page flat tax. You fill in, here's how much I earned, here's how many dependents, I'm paying 15%. We want you to have the Romney 15% rate as a flat tax option, or keep the current code. You get to choose which one you like. This is a system. This system has been used in Hong Kong for 40 years. And the result would be that for most Americans, there'd be less paperwork, less confusion, and a lower tax rate. Now, the establishment in Washington will tell you that that's not revenue neutral. And they're right. It's called a tax cut. And a tax cut cannot be revenue neutral. On the other hand, here's my principle. I want to shrink Obama's spending down to the level of revenue, not raise your revenue to catch up with his spending. One of the ways in which I strongly disagree with the Republican establishment, I am not running to be the tax collector for Obama's credit card. I am running to cut up the credit card and reduce government spending so that we actually have a country that's dynamic and that's growing. And frankly, there are two ways to dramatically increase government revenue. The first is to have a full employment economy. When I left the speakership, I'd had two phases of helping create jobs. One with Ronald Reagan, where through tax cuts and regulatory reform and focusing on American energy, we created 16 million new jobs in an 8-year period. The other was working with Bill Clinton, where in 4 years' time with welfare reform, 2 out of 3 people went to work or went to school, cutting spending, only the second time since World War II, cutting taxes. We ended up creating 11 million new jobs. The unemployment rate dropped to 4.2%. Well, if you took the real unemployment number today with all the people who aren't looking for work, and so you actually created enough jobs to actually bring the real unemployment number down to 4.2%. That's all the people you're taking off of food stamps, off of Medicaid, off of public housing, off of unemployment compensation. That all saves the government money. That means over here, They're all now working and paying taxes and taking care of their families. So government revenue goes up while government spending goes down. That was the basis for 4 consecutive years of a balanced budget. So we can do it. But there's a second gigantic potential source. I just did a radio show on the way over here in North Dakota. In North Dakota today, they're developing the Bakken field, and they're producing so much oil that they have 3.5% unemployment, and they've had 7 consecutive, that is a phrase that I helped popularize with Sean Hannity, so, you know, we both did a petition drive on Drill Here, Drill Now, Pay Less. We wrote a book of that name, and Callista and I actually made a movie called We Have the Power, so I'm very fond of Drill Here, Drill Now, Pay Less, and it does work. Here are 2 things to remember about North Dakota, where they've had 7 consecutive state tax cuts because so much money's coming in from this energy. If that had been public land, it would not have been developed. Just think about it. North Dakota is unique because the oil is on private land, and therefore they could actually do it without the government stopping them. There's a second thing to remember. Because the U.S. Geological Survey studies are 30 years old, all the technology was obsolete. Today in North Dakota, the estimate is that there is 25 times more oil, not 25%, 2,500% more oil than the U.S. Geological Survey thought there was. Now, what does that say? It means if we were to develop all of our federal assets, remember, we own 69% of Alaska. We own 85% of Nevada. If we were to develop our federal lands and develop our offshore capabilities, we would generate so much energy that no American president would ever again bow to a Saudi king. And what would the result of all that extra revenue be? It means that the federal government would earn royalties out of all the developments. And what I'd like to see us do is set up a pattern where 2/3 of all the new royalties goes to deficit reduction and 1/3 goes to infrastructure building, so that we can actually have an infrastructure rebuilt to enable us to be competitive with China and India, so that we have the most modern infrastructure in the world. I mean, these are the kind of practical solutions that we can do if we're prepared as a country to go out and do them. I also want to dramatically modernize the federal government. We believe that you could save at least $500 billion a year just by having a more modern government, that the bureaucracy, the red tape, the regulatory process, the whole way the civil service works today really inhibits us. The example I like to use is I describe it as the world that works and the world that fails. Very simple model. How many of you have ever gone online to track a package at UPS or FedEx? Just raise your hand if you've ever done that. Okay. So this is not a theory, right? Now, I say that because when you go to Washington, their eyes glaze over. I mean, they keep going, why does Gingrich talk about all these strange ideas? And I keep trying to convince them, this is called the real world. Okay? So you actually have a system today, right, where 24 million packages a day can be tracked in real time on your computer at no extra cost. That's over here. That's the world that works. Now, over here is the federal government, which cannot today find 11 million illegal immigrants if they're sitting still. So one of my proposals is that we send a package to every person who's here illegally. And then when they get the package, we pull up the computer, we know where they are. Now, for the fact checkers and news media, that was hyperbole. I didn't actually mean it. But it illustrates, doesn't it illustrate a key point, though? We talked to American Express, Visa, and MasterCard, and the best estimate we can get is if they ran Medicare and Medicaid so that they used their anti-fraud systems, we would save between $60 and $110 billion a year that currently goes to crooks. We actually wrote a book called Stop Paying the Crooks, which we thought might be clear enough that it would get through in Washington, but it didn't. But it's the same principle. I mean, the government is such an incompetent administrator of your money that we literally believe somewhere between $60 and $110 billion a year is siphoned off by crooks in Medicare and Medicaid alone, not counting food stamps, not counting student loans. I mean, in South Florida today, professional criminals tell each other it is safer and more profitable to steal from Medicare and Medicaid than it is to sell cocaine. So you've actually had a migration into organized professional theft because the government's so incompetent. So I think we can have a dramatic resurgence. Our goal, if I could summarize it in a simple way, our goal is to unleash the American people so that they can go out and rebuild the country we love. And that means getting the federal government dramatically out of the way, applying the 10th Amendment, returning power back home, allowing you to make a lot more decisions in your life. Now, to make this practical, with your help, if we win the Ohio primary, and there was a poll out this morning that I'm ahead by a tiny margin. So, we need your help to make it a bigger margin. But if we win the primary and we go on to win the nomination, then I want to run as a team this fall. My good friend, your former Congressman Bob McEwen is here, and Bob can tell you. Bob can tell you that we were very successful, both in 1980 in organizing the first Capitol Steps event with Governor Reagan, where we brought House and Senate candidates together, and in 1994, when we got 350 candidates to come together to pledge the contract with America. We got the largest one-party increase in American history, 9 million new votes. It made a huge difference. We can do it this year. If we do it this year, with your help, we will. Here's what I want us to campaign on this fall. I'll ask every candidate for the House and Senate to agree that when they get sworn in on January 3rd, they will stay in office. They will pass the repeal of Obamacare immediately. They will pass the repeal of the Dodd-Frank bill, which has been killing small banks, killing small business. And they will pass the repeal of Sarbanes-Oxley, which has been adding cost to business without adding any useful information. Those three steps we would like to have done by January 20th. So when I'm sworn in on the very first day, we could sign all three. Now that would be real and it would be practical. I'm going to get that in just a second. In addition to the laws, there are a number of things you can do by executive order. We are developing an entire list of executive orders, all of which will be published by October 1st, so everybody will understand if you vote for me, this is what's going to happen. The very first executive order, all these will be signed on the day I'm sworn in. After about 2 hours after the inaugural address, we'll stop and we'll just sign executive orders for a while. The very first one will abolish all of the White House czars as of that moment. I will also sign an executive order repealing all of the anti-religious bigotry in this administration. I will sign an Lead us back to the Bible, Newt. Well, I think what I want to do is lead you back to the Declaration of Independence, which says we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. If you have an honest teaching of American history, you cannot explain America without the Declaration of Independence. And you cannot explain the Declaration of Independence without understanding that our founding fathers believed that these were truths. Remember, it starts, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Not principles, not ideology, not philosophy, truths. That we were all created equal, which in 1776 was a very radical position. And it's one we didn't fully live up to at the time. We had slavery, women had a secondary role, but we have for 230 years been slowly and steadily reaching out to a point to live up to the ideal. It was the ideal that was so revolutionary. We then went on to say, we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now, this is really central to America. It's one of the things that Obama completely doesn't understand. The fact is that in America, we believe power comes from God to each one of you personally. You are personally sovereign.